The conditional and future tenses have a lot in common, so we're just going to put them together in one set of notes for one place for easy reference, and I'm just going to call them your ConFu notes because, I don't know, it sounds like Kung Fu to me and sort of entertains me and makes me laugh, so gotta entertain myself. Anyway, so what do they have in common? Well, the formation of the future and the conditional have three things in common. Only one endings chart. As you know from the future, they all had the same shoebox endings. Didn't matter if they were AR, ER, IR, or irregular verbs. Same thing with the conditional. There will only be one chart. To conjugate into either tense, you take the whole darn infinitive plus the appropriate ending. And the future and the conditional share the same 12 irregulars, and they are treated exactly the same in both of the tenses. The future and the conditional also are both used to express probability. This is not going to be a main focus, but it's good to know. As you guys are finishing 3B, you're about to go off into either the real world or Spanish 4, maybe, and in certain if statements, and that will be important in this unit. I'm moving on. Press pause if you need to. So here are your irregulars, which you should already know. I don't require you that you know the saying off to the left. However, it can be very helpful to jog your memory if you're ever forgetting some. So this time, since it's the conditional and the future, we have what the conditional is used to say what someone would do, and what the future is used to say what someone will do. Here are your verbs, and if you don't remember what the irregular stems are, go ahead and consult your future notes, but I think you can do it by what I've done here. And if you recall, the after six verbs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the top 6 have something in common and the bottom 6 have something in common. That's why I've drawn that line there. And wherever you see boxes today, you need to have the information filled in for full credit when I check your notes. Speaking of credit, these notes are worth double because they are lengthy and require work from you, so you will be rewarded for it. So fill those in. The future tense, as you know, to form it, you take the whole darn infinitive or the irregular stem plus these endings for all verbs, AR, ER, IR, and irregulars. And like I said, you already know your future endings, so I will expect to see them here. Shoes in a shoebox, 5 accents. And then, because you guys are just so smart, I'm going to ask that you also include a full chart for these verbs, including their definitions. And here, instead of writing irregular of your choice, pick one of those irregulars. Give me a full chart for it. Don't leave it topless. So here will be reference for the future tense. As you know, the future is used to say what someone will or will not do and what will or will not happen. So that means you can translate this sentence. We haven't discussed this, but it makes sense. It is used to conclude likely if statements in the present tense, like this. So go ahead and translate that sentence. And this one, again, we are not super focused on this unit, but it is used to wonder about or express a guess concerning the present, which I call present probability. What time must it, may it, is it probably, or I wonder what time it is, you use the future for that. I know that sounds crazy, but the future tense is a way to discuss present probability. Maybe you don't know for sure, which I don't know who would not know the time because who doesn't have their cell phone on them at all times these days, but it must be maybe probably is 3 o'clock. Again, you would use the future to discuss present probability. Go ahead and write all of that down, and let's move on. All right, finally, the conditional tense. To form it, you take the whole darn infinitive, or the irregular stem, plus the same endings as ER and IR verbs in the imperfect. Because you guys are verb quiz professionals at this point, I'm sure that you can fill in all of the endings for ER, IR verbs in the imperfect. Or you can consult some of your resources, but I would expect to see that chart here when I check your notes. And for really good solidifying practice, we're going to need the charts for these verbs and a different irregular verb than what you chose for the future tense. And don't leave it topless. Let's find out what it's used to say. You don't have to rewrite this, it's just the conditional tense continued. The conditional tense, when I said you don't have to write this, I meant that gray part. You do need to write what it says here for number 1. The conditional tense is used to say what someone would or would not do and what would or would not happen given a certain unlikely or contrary to fact condition. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll show you in just a second, but first of all, let me just say the conditional is not used for past would. Like my dad would always make pancakes in the morning, because what you're really saying is my dad used to always make pancakes in the morning, and as you know, this would be the imperfect. So only present would or future would, but not past would, if that makes any sense at all. If not, let me know and we'll talk about it in class. So here is a certain unlikely or contrary to fact situation with more money, but I don't have any more. Yo en tu lugar, me in your place, like if I were you, essentially. So in your place, but I'm not, I would buy your mom an awesome Mother's Day gift. I don't know. Yo que tú, again, this is a colloquial expression, so it can't be directly translated, but it's also essentially saying if I were you, but I'm not, I would study for the Spanish final. So here's an example sentence that I'm sure you can translate because it's one of these contrary to fact statements plus the conditional. And the conditional is used to say what someone would do. This is nuevo, not nueve, not the number. Keep that in mind. So continued again, don't have to write that part. In such sentences, the unlikely or contrary to fact condition is often expressed by si plus the imperfect subjunctive. Si without an accent. What does si without an accent mean? If. If we were on vacation, but we're not. So this verb right here is estar in the imperfect subjunctive. How did we get that? Well, you take the preterite eos form. What's the preterite eos form of estar? Well, if you were to conjugate it, it's a teacup, estuve, estuviste, estuvo, estuvimos, estuvisteis, estuvieron. So you take that, estuvieron, you drop the ron, and you add what I call cheerleader endings. Because back in like, I don't know, the 1940s, 1950s, I don't know, I wasn't alive then, a lot of cheerleaders used to say like, rah, rah, rah. And it sounds silly, but those are the endings. Ra, ras, ra. Accent Ramos, what we mean by that is the accent goes on the letter before the R in Ramos, rice, and ran. So here, I'm going to want you to give me a full chart for tener in the imperfect subjunctive. What is the preterite eos form of tener? I'll even get you started. Tuvieron. So you're going to take this, drop the ron, you're left with tuvier, and you're going to add ra, ras, ra, accent, ramos, rice, and run. So I would like to see that chart because that will help you say things like, if I had $1 million, just like this one saying if we were on vacation, and then you finish them to say what someone would do. If I had $1 million, I would buy a new house. So those contrary to fact if statements are often formed by si plus the imperfect subjunctive, which is formed just like this. What else is the conditional used to say? Reason number 2, it's used to make polite requests with verbs such as gustar, poder, and deber. Again, it's used to say what someone would do. So go ahead and translate that sentence. It's a nice way of saying that. So poder means to can or to be able to. So how would you translate it in the future? Well, there is no, or not the future, the conditional. There's no would, can. It's just could. So I'll move this box out of the way. Could you? And you can finish that translation. And then to be polite and make this phrase, you could say deberías estudiar más. And just like there's no would can, There's no would, should. So you're still just saying you should before the rest of this. However, it's more polite than the present indicative, which I'm sure you can translate here. In English, they're going to sound exactly the same, but in Spanish, deberías is slightly more polite than debes. Reason number 3, we're not super focused on, but it's very good to know going forward with complete notes. It's used for past probability. So if I said, ¿Qué hora sería? What time was it probably? Maybe you just told me this big story about some thief running through the neighborhood, and I heard something around 3 o'clock. So I want to know, well, what time was it that the thief was running through? I don't know. That's a poor example. You think of a better one. But anyway, I wonder what time it was. And it probably was 3 o'clock. So the future is used for present probability, but the conditional is used for past probability. Go and write that down and then move on with me for the last reason to use the conditional. This part sounds super crazy, but it actually makes sense if you don't overthink it. The conditional is used to describe future events in relation to a point in the past, like indirect quotations. Here's an example sentence that uses the present tense with the future to say, it's the impersonal say, they, people, one, or you are announcing that the plane will arrive late. That's like with a delay, so late. If you want to then talk about this later, maybe you were on the plane or you were waiting for someone to arrive on a plane and you wanted to talk about it after the fact, this is what you would do. You would use the preterite with the conditional to say, I was wondering where so-and-so was, but at that moment they announced that the plane would arrive late. And you're saying would, so you would use the conditional. That's, finally, I'm done saying all I have to say about the future and the conditional. That was a lot of information, so you will get rewarded with points for taking your notes. Good job.